Welcome back to the Old Spice Boys podcast in the week when the most wondrously weird transfer window in the 20 years since its inception was closed after £1.1 billion had been spent by clubs in the Premier League, the most by bottom club Arsenal. Ipswich, without a win in League One, bought in 19 players. We have to start with the craziness in the game. Two of your former clubs, Tottenham and Barcelona, in the midst of the mayhem, one of them for not selling and one for selling everybody. You described the transfer window last night on Twitter as baffling. Would you care to elaborate a little for us?
Do I need to? I think we've had a pandemic for 18 months now, where obviously fans were not allowed in the grounds. Yet, despite that, and despite obviously so many cries of pain within the football community, that extraordinary amounts of money have been spent. Clubs have got themselves in a real pickle, like Barcelona. Other clubs seem to have handled it really well. We had the world's two greatest players both leaving their clubs, one because he wanted to, the other because they couldn't even afford to have him for nothing. I would say it was fairly baffling, or perhaps bonkers would be a better word, but it's been an extraordinary window. Real Madrid have got their bid of about 200 million euros turned down for a player that's only got 1 year left, for Kylian Mbappe. So it was just extraordinary in so many different ways.
Barcelona, I think, obviously is the one that springs immediately to mind. You spend a lot of time there, the Spanish game inside out. To an outsider, this just seems like an absurdity. How can a club like that have fallen on such hard times?
Badly run, simple as that. Just obviously they sold Neymar a few years ago when they were doing really well at that point, in Champions League successes and stuff, with that incredible forward line of Neymar, Suarez, and of course Messi. From there on in, I think they got a couple of 100 million for Neymar, but I think they've subsequently spent close to £1 billion on, and overstretched themselves, massively overstretched themselves, both in terms of how much they've spent and obviously in salaries. Now, you can understand why a club would do everything they can to keep Messi and spend, and because obviously it's ludicrous amounts of money in many ways, but he's a global superstar. He delivers week in, week out. He's done it for 17 years. But then to pay salaries not different to players like Griezmann and one or two others, and they spent, 100-odd million on Griezmann, 100-odd million on Coutinho, 100-odd million on Dembele. Just madness. And the truth is, none of the transfers really worked out. And I've only mentioned 3 or 4 names, and there are so many more. So they got themselves into a real pickle. La Liga obviously have put in rules to try and moderate the amount of money that's paid out in salaries, etc. So in the end, they didn't renew Messi's contract when they could have done. They let it finish. Therefore, they couldn't re-sign him because of the rules of that have been put in place in La Liga. So it was a complete shambles, to be perfectly honest. For a club of that magnitude to be in such a mess is, mess came club, wasn't it, really?
Gary, is this a warning to maybe some of our big clubs? Because it's spend, isn't it, if it's like there's no tomorrow?
It is. I suppose you have to look at net spends as well. And the biggest net spend by far has been Arsenal. You think, no, Manchester, all that money on Sancho and then all that money on Varane, but they've let a few players have gone out. So the net spend is not too mad. Manchester City didn't end up really buying anybody of any note in the window, which is a bit of a surprise. Chelsea, actually, I think they've just about made a net profit, despite obviously a huge amount of money spent on Lukaku, which I think will possibly turn them into title contenders at the very least. So it's been interesting. But yeah, I think most clubs, even the percentage of the salary, sometimes it gets to around, 70% of what they bring in. If it goes higher than that, I think you start getting a real problem. So I would imagine, I don't know the internal runnings of all our football clubs, but I would hope they're on top of that. But Barcelona just let it get away from them.
Well, she started a fund to save Leicester. Will you start a fund to try and save Barcelona?
I think it'd be a big fund to try and save. Leicester's one thing, but it's 20 years ago as well. And I remember we had I was call it a whip round. It's a very big whip round for about 40 people. Some of them Leicester fans, some of them not. Some of them business friends, etc. My agent John Holmes and myself, who were both massive Leicester fans. The club was in administration 20 years ago now, and at that point, it was more It was a charitable gesture. We never intended to make any money. Well, I think we got about 10% of our money back, but that was never, we just wanted to, save the club, because football clubs are so important, not just for the supporters, but for the community and what they give and everything around it. It would have been a tragedy to lose it. But yeah, I don't think it would need one hell of a whip out. People have stepped up. PK, he did a massive pay cut in order that they could register a couple of the players that they brought in the summer. You do find out about people in these circumstances, I think.
And now we see Leicester as, don't we, Gary, as the kind of paragon of how a football club should be run. I mean, it must give you a great amount of satisfaction to see what your club has become in the last 10 years or so. Quite extraordinary, really.
It is. It's a town. Obviously, when we were in charge of the club, we had it for a few years and then pretty much gave it away to people that could actually invest in players in the club. And then it went from another owner, and now we've got the present incumbent. Sadly, obviously, that Top's father died in that tragic accident. But that aside, and that's a bigger side, obviously, it's been hugely gratifying what they've done. Not just in terms of how the club's run, in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of their recruitment, which has been unbelievably good and consistently good. So they've backed the club, but they've also, even despite all the success, they've sold players along the way. You see Kante, Mahrez, Harry Maguire, the big players have gone. But beside that, they've managed to keep finding young gems, which is important. But it's not just that. What they've done to the community, they've backed the Leicester community. It's a lovely kind of background there. There's a feel-good factor around the club, and when you go, people actually outside of Leicester say nice things about Leicester, and that sounds, why not? But it sounds a bit daft in many ways. But that's quite unusual in football because it's such a tribal game. But I think people like the fact that the club has been run nicely.
Well, it's one of the greatest football stories in modern times, wasn't it? When you won the league, an absolute fairy tale, Gary. Not just for Leicester, but for football, wasn't it?
It really was, John. I still pinch myself sometimes and chat with I've got 3 of my 4 boys are Leicester fans. George is a Head fan, but he was always very contrite. But it was living that experience with them was I think it was the best thing I've ever experienced in sport. And I played, obviously, I had a long career, but nothing beats that. It was magical because it was impossible. Yeah. When I did the silly tweet about doing Match of the Day, it was obviously just a joke. I think it was early December 14th, something like that. And when I did that tweet, it was just for a laugh. And I categorically knew that 100% that there was no chance that Leicester would go on to win the league. 0 chance. And then it went on and it rumbled on. And then they beat City, didn't they, in that early kickoff on a Saturday, 3-1 their place. And you started to think, is it impossible? And then I remember all the games then started getting switched to a Sunday. So it enabled me to watch them at home rather than at the studio when I do Match of the Day on Saturdays. So
with your sons as well,
Gary. The sons came round, and it was like they won 1-0, they won 1-0, they won 1-0, they won 2. It was agony, and it was supposed to be enjoyable, and it was when the final whistle. And then the closer it got to the miracle possibly coming true, the more painfully difficult to watch. The last couple of weeks, you were thinking, if it doesn't happen now, it will be like the end of the world.
Yeah,
it got to that stage. I was downstairs here with my boys. We were all watching the game. It wasn't a Leicester playing, of course, when they won the league. It was Chelsea-Tottenham. And when Hazard bent that in the top corner, that's all right. It gets me even now when I talk about it. I always get a little bit emotional. It was just unbelievable.
A bit different from running up and down sand dunes with Jock Wallace and Ian.
I'll never forget that. You do have to be a Spice Boy to remember that. But Jock Wallace came down from Scotland.
Very old Spice Boy.
Big, scary character, Big Jock was. And he had this Scottish accent as well. Terrifying, huge he was, 6'4". And he was famous for getting the Rangers players, where he was previously, to run up and down the sand dunes. Now, Leicester's probably as far away as you can get from the sea in the entire country. So what he did, he had some sand brought in. He built up these sand hills. And I think it was called, it might have been Sison or One Lip, something like that. And he had all these massive hills. It was a little bit of a publicity stunt as well. He was quite canny. And I never forget, we were running up and down these bloody hills, and it It's a agony. And it was a hot day, pre-season training. All the press were there, radio, there were journalists. And I'll never forget, I walked down and Dennis Rofe was being interviewed by this reporter. I don't know whether you can remember Dennis Rofe, lovely, left. And he's Cockney accent, but he had quite a high-pitched voice. And they were interviewing him, and the interviewer said to him something along the, so what's he like, this Jock Wallace? And Dennis Rowe just run down up this hill, and he went, I don't know, I can't understand the fucking word he says. When he says jump, you don't know fucking jump. And it was a bit of a gimmick. So the club's come a long way.
Come a long way since then.
If it's any consolation, Gary, we were scared of him.
Experienced him, yeah.
He
was great. I remember he came in. The first time I ever came face to face with him, he came in a reserve game. When he joined, I was about just 17, 8, just got into the reserve side at Leicester. And we played at Filbert Street, and it was half time. And we come in, sat down, and suddenly this door opens, bang, and he comes in the first time I see it. And he's going, you wee English lazy little shit, you. Oh, he's looking at me. So he's coming at me, and I'm going, and he's pinned me up against the dressing room wall. And I was like, oh my God, I've scored both. At the end of the game, he comes in, he went, hey, laddie, my office, 9 o'clock in the morning. I thought, oh no. So I went home, never slept. I thought I was out. My career was ended. I thought it was all over. So I remember sitting outside his office like I was a naughty boy outside the headmaster's office, trembling. And I got there about 10 to 9. And I was sat there for about 15 minutes, suddenly got a call, and he went, come in, laddie, sit down. So I sat down, he went, I just wanted to say, you were magnificent last night. I went, I'm sorry. He went, you're magnificent, but I just want to keep you on the right path, laddie. You got to work hard, continue working hard. If you do, you'll have a great career. And I thought, oh, geez, really? But anyway, he was a great man, Jock. And sadly, he contracted Parkinson's disease and died far too young. But great man, a really great. I owe a lot to him because he made me live my life properly. I was so terrified of him. I completely didn't. I ignored all the nightlife, everything. I just did what he said. Yeah.
Is it fair to say that managers like that can't exist now, Gary, because it's a completely different world, isn't it? I mean, it'd be called bullying in these days, wouldn't it?
I suppose it would in many ways, yeah. Times change. You can't look back now and say that was a bullying thing. It was how it was, and I'm glad of it because it made me, I think it helped me terms of, certainly helped my attitude and everything like that. But yeah, it's changed. It's a different game now. We live in different times. Completely different times, and it's probably better, really. I think we all respond better, don't we, to an arm around the shoulder and a little kind, sensitive word. We probably do an absolute bollocking, but that's how it used to be. So it's hard to compare. Who knows what, if one team from then played against a team doing that now, who knows which one would come out on top. But yeah, footballers, like most people, probably like to be treated like human beings, and by and large, and decent people, which they are, I think, mostly.
You were it's pretty fair to say, Gary, a natural goal scorer, because the word has it that you weren't exactly a prodigious trainer. You did what you had to do, but you had this incredible knack in front of goal of just that sixth sense that all good strikers, all great strikers need to have.
I would argue both those points slightly. The training thing it depended what the training was. If the training was something that I felt I was getting something out of, then I was a really good trainer. If we were playing meaningless five-a-sides, I couldn't really, it just didn't motivate me. So I just go through the motions a little bit because it's not really, but you could, fitness training, working really hard pre-season, absolutely. Finishing training, working on my touch, control, all that sort of thing, I'd do it all day long. But if it's like the end of the session, let's have a 5 or 6-a-side around the thing, and, I want to play up front, and then what's the point of practicing goals? It's fine. It was fine. I go through it, but
no, fair point.
Yeah, and then on the other thing, natural in some ways, yeah. I was, but worked out how people say, "Oh, he's in the right place at the right time," but the key to scoring goals is being in the right place all the time. So you basically you attack a space in the box. That's how you got to score goals. You gamble on where you think the ball's going to go. So and the key is you move the defender one way and then you go the other. It's fairly simple. But what most strikers get wrong is they wait to see where the ball's going to go before they do that run. I used to just gamble on where I thought it might go. So I would go boom and then charge at the near post. Take, for example, first goal, World Cup 1986. Against, do a little run that way, and then I cut across the defender on the off chance that Gary Stevens will knock it in exactly where I want it to go. And on that occasion, he did. And then people said, he's in the right place at the right time. But you could make that run 20 times in a game, and the guy crossing it, it might go to the keeper, it might go behind the goal, it might pull it behind you, it might go over your head. But on that one occasion that he hits it in that spot, you've got a tap in, and people say, he's just got this instinct to be there. It was never about instinct. It was about attacking a certain space and hoping the ball would go there. And then you've got I used to hear it so often. I used to say, Lineker, he did nothing all game. And then in the 85th minute, he came up and he scored a tap in 3 yards. That's all he did. What they've done, they've missed the 50 runs you've made to try and find that space in the box where it didn't go to you. And that's the key to goal scoring. It's as simple as that. But it surprises me how few actually get it, how they don't work it out. But I look at some people. Thomas Muller, absolutely perfect example of knowing how to score goals. Does exactly that.
Can you teach somebody to score goals, or has it got to be there, as you say, more natural, Gary?
Yeah, it seems natural because I think I could help certain players that perhaps have got unbelievably talented feet and this and that. I think I could help them become a better goal scorer by giving them basic lessons. But then I think most coaches should know this anyway. So I think you can teach it. And I very much taught it to myself because I worked it out by watching others. And over a period of time, even when I moved to Spain, I thought I've got to find different ways of scoring goals because it's man-to-man. A lot of it was man-to-man and sweepers and stuff like that. But it's all about movement. And it's all about the timing of the movement as well. So I think you can teach that. I'd be surprised if it's not something, I'm not a coach. I've got no interest in. If, say, someone like Marcus Rashford or someone or one of our up-and-coming strikers saying, I'd like a little bit of help on, I don't score enough goals in the 6-yard box. I'm pretty sure I could give them a few tips, and they're intelligent young men, and improve that side of the game. But if they wanted that advice, I'd gladly give it. Or they could just listen to this podcast and then...
I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example, Gary. Timo Werner last season seemed to do everything right except put the ball in the back of the net. And
you've also got to be able to finish when you're there. It's a kind of prerequisite for a goal scorer. But confidence can play a part. We all have bad spells. He doesn't strike, but he scored lots of goals in Germany and in the season before. Maybe he's one of those players that works on confidence, but his movement's there, and he seemed to get in a bit of a rut, whether that's just a bad spell, a lack of confidence, or ultimately he's not quite got it. Only time will tell.
Yeah. Of the kind of modern generation, Gary, of strikers, who really gets you on the edge of your seat?
Well, edge of my seat. If you mean in terms of watching a player, then Messi. But if you're talking about a striker that I think actually does the sort of stuff that I used to do, who reminds me a little bit of myself, I'd probably pick Cavani, because his movement is very similar to how I used to create that space for myself, and he gambles on attacking areas. I see it all the time, so he naturally does it. But if you're talking about a footballer getting me on the edge of my seat, I don't think it surprises anyone because I'm quite vocal on who I think is the greatest footballer to watch ever. Is Messi. Yeah. He's just extraordinary. He does. Even on his quiet days, he'll do 3 or 4 things in a game that you think, how does he do that? How can he get out of that situation when there are 4 players around him and wriggle out? And how did he see that pass? Because people only they tend to focus just on the goals. But he's the best dribbler by a mile I've ever seen. The only one who probably comes close is Diego, and they're similar in that. And then his passing range is as good as anyone I've ever seen. So and then the fact that he scores as many as anyone's ever scored, he's up there. Him and Ronaldo, very similar in that sense. If you said who's the greatest goal scorer, Ronaldo or Messi, there's not a lot to choose between them. But if you're talking about who's the greatest footballer, I judge it by someone that brings me joy when I watch the game, and not just goals. And I was a goal scorer, so I think I should give credit to the goal scorers. But Messi's unbelievable. He's just just mouth-wateringly brilliant.
Where would you put Cristiano Ronaldo then, Gary? Is it a no-brainer for Man United to bring him back?
I think for a few reasons. I think it's a lovely story for a start, and I think it's good for Cristiano. It's interesting, isn't it? He's obviously ruthless, Cristiano. He's driven, and I totally admire the ways he goes. He's suddenly gone, Juventus, are they going to be that good? They didn't play very well this season. I'm not going to win much for them. And he's made his move happen just like that. He still had a year or two left on his contract, but he's made it happen. You perhaps compare that with Harry, he's a nice guy. Harry loves Tottenham, and in the end, he's gone. Oh, he's probably got, who knows whether he's got, I don't know the ins and outs of it. There's always two sides to every story. He's probably got, Daniel Levy a year ago, he's probably said to him, listen, give me one more season. If we don't win anything, I promise I'll let you go. He should have got that. If that's the case, I don't know. He should have got that in writing. Obviously, he didn't. But this is football clubs looked after themselves. They always have done and always will do. And the fans will always side with the football club. That's the most important thing to them. And understandably, Ronaldo, no, I'm going. That's it. I'm off. You like? I'm going. He's made it happen. And sometimes you have to look after yourself, and he's done that. But I think it's great that he went back to Manchester United. I think it's so exciting for the Premier League. Yes, he's 36, going on 37, but he's still an unbelievable athlete, and he'll score a lot of goals for Manchester United. And I think also probably in the thoughts of Manchester United, I don't think they'd want him to go into City, not just because of in terms of the team, and they might be a stronger presence, but I think more importantly, if you sign, which we've seen obviously with Messi, if you sign a Messi or Ronaldo, and you're a new money club like PSG or Manchester City, where you're gradually building a support base in other parts of the world, if you sign Ronaldo, Messi, you suddenly become a global entity. You are huge. You get overnight hundreds of millions of extra fans supporting your football club, because a lot of people now follow players as much as they do. Yeah. Certainly with those two, it's almost tribal. It's mad. If you do a nice tweet about Messi, you just get a load of people saying, what about Ronaldo? He's better. If you do a nice tweet about Ronaldo, you get, but we're Messi. And you just think, no, just enjoy them both. Yes, I've offered my opinion about who I think's the better player, but that's just my opinion. But it's been such a privilege and joy to been able to watch them both for so many years. But I think in United's head as well, they wouldn't really want Man City competing with them in terms of a stature of a football club. They could have probably nipped off 10 years worth of development Manchester City if they'd signed Cristiano Ronaldo.
I know there's somebody who wouldn't want him to go to City. That's Alex Ferguson, who I think did play a part in this.
I think they all did. And Rio, I think Rooney, I think they got them all on. I think all hands on deck we're calling Cristiano and trying to make him join Manchester United. It's going to be really fun to see him back in that shirt. See if he gets the number 7.
You were mentioning about our age group, and I suppose, Gary, in a sense, Paul Gascoigne is the closest we had in our game to a player like a Messi or a Ronaldo, and we're still looking for someone to fill those shoes. What are your memories, especially of days with Gazza?
I've got lots of memories of days with Gazza. A lot of them quite hilarious, but actually on the football pitch, obviously he's hugely talented. It's quite difficult to play with Gazza because he played like he was in the schoolyard. He was the kid that always wanted the ball and he didn't want anyone else to have it. And he played like that as a professional. So he could be exasperating, but it was still a joy to play with. And we have the odd row during matches when he wouldn't pass me the ball. But talent-wise, unbelievable. And that's why I used to look at, how can he beat 3 or 4 players and stuff like that? And you think, wow, what a player. And then you look at someone like Messi, who's like 10 times better, and you think, how can someone be that much better than someone that was that good? Gazza, ability-wise, obviously, it's self-imploded a little bit in different ways, certainly with his injury in the final against Forest and stuff, which debilitated him, really. He never moved quite the same after that, but gorgeous footballer, such an intelligent footballer as well. Always people say, oh, he's daft. He was daft in a funny way. He was actually seriously witty, Gazza, and practical jokes were clever. Sometimes he'd go too far, but that's the nature of the man. But a lot of time for him. He brings me up every now and again. We have a chat, and he seems to be doing all right at present. So hopefully that's still the case.
As his former ghostwriter, that's why I've got grey hair. back in the Tottenham
all
days.
those stories, I lived a lot of those stories, and just so funny.
Is this true, Gary, that you used to have a bath sometimes before games because you hit back? And there's one game where he had a bath before and he was taken off after 30 minutes, exhausted.
No, it was just after half time he came off. I'll tell you what happened, because yes, I always used to have a bath before a game. We were playing at Main Road. Most grounds had the little baths, but some of them just had the big communal ones. And Main Road was one of those. So what I used to do, the first thing I did when I got to the ground was, because at home I used to have my routine. But when I say I have a hot bath, yes, I did. But in that much water, and I'd sit down, stretch, touch, a bit of that stretch, just made me feel a bit looser. 2 minutes max, out, change, go to my warm-up. So anyway, at Main Road, I had to fill this big bath. It's one of those huge communal ones. So first thing, went and look out the pitch, came back, got it nice and hot, up to about this height. And I was just standing in there, just doing a few stretches. And you do, bomb on, touching my toes. And Gazza walks in. We went for a pee or something. And Gazza walks in. He goes, "You always have a bath. You always have a bath before a game." I went, "Yeah." I said, "Just got minutes, quick stretch, just makes you feel better," because I was always a bit stiff. And he went, "Try it." I went, "Why not? I'll give it a go." So he jumps in. I go out, get my kit on, go down, training, blah blah blah. Warm up, probably 15 minutes. Came back, sat down, got ready, put my shin pads on, walked into the bathroom. Last thing I always do before a game is have a quick, and walked in, and there's Gazza in the bath. And he's sitting there, he's lying there like that, up to there, just the water's up to there. He's gone, "This is great, this is great." I said, "Don't tell me you've been in there since, please don't tell me you've been in there since I left." His face was like a strawberry. It was so red. I've gone, "Oh, God." So we go out, we get him out, we get on the pitch. I think 20 minutes in, we're about 2 down. Gaz is all over the place. He's going, "Legs." I said, "I'm all dizzy." I went, "Oh, God." I said, "We're getting at half time." Terry Venables has gone. He's gone, "Gazza, what the hell's wrong with you?" He said, he told me to have a bath. Yeah.
God, fantastic. You mentioned Terry. You played for a variety of different managers and coaches, Gary. I wonder which one perhaps brought out the best of you and why that was so.
That's a difficult one. It's because they were all important in different ways. Jock Wallace was great for the reasons I told you about. Gordon Milne really helped me development and my touch and helped me on things like that. Then Howard Kendall. I was only a year with Howard, but Howard, the team, the way that was the best team ever. Everton was so good in the 80s. That team I had to play for. And we couldn't play in Europe because of obviously Heysel had happened the year before I signed, and English clubs were banned, which was a massive blow. And then I was at Barcelona suddenly. I was with Terry. But I would say I think I was more mature with Terry as well. So I was in an age where I could talk more about the game and think more about the game. And Terry was a great thinker. And he was different from all the other coaches that I played for in the sense that most coaches, managers, Bobby Robson, great man manager, get the best out of everything, run through a wall. But tactically, it was pretty much the team shape. Or you do stuff in training for your team shape, and this and that. And it was all about that. But Terry would think on an individual basis how he can make you better. Every week there'd be 2 or 3 things where he'd go, "When the ball," I've been thinking, when the ball's on that side, if sometimes you just went over there and just dropped deep and then would that work, or this, or then something on your touch? Maybe if you took it that way in these circumstances. And he'd throw things at you. Sometimes you go, "I'm not sure that'll work, Terry." And other times you go, "Yeah, maybe." And then other times you go, "That's genius." So I probably learned more by the fact just thinking about doing different things under Terry Venables. Cruyff was a genius of a coach, different in terms of how to make the pitch bigger. However, and it was all 9 against 7 and 7 against 5, and I'd say we didn't get on, but he didn't really want me there when he arrived. We were only allowed 2 foreign players, and he wanted his own, so he tried to mess me about by playing me on the wing all season. I understood that, but as a coach, so clever, and in training, he was still the best player. He was unbelievably talented, Johan Cruyff. But yes, I was lucky to play with some great people, and Bobby Robson with England, who we all loved Bobby. And he was just an adorable human being, and a lot of fun as well. So yeah, so I was really lucky in my career to play with so many top managers.
You must have enjoyed Italian 90, Gary. It was a fantastic few weeks, wasn't it? We came so near.
I know. I don't know. I think that's one of the best England sides, I think, ever. I think we found our feet in the tournament. I think we played good football for the first time ever. We'd switched away from 4-4-2 or even 4-4-1-1. We started playing three at the back and then pushed the fullbacks on. And we played Germany. I don't know whether you can remember what happened. But midfield three was Waddle, Gascoigne, Platt. There's not a defensive cell in sight really in those three. Yet it worked because then we had the three at the back, and Desmond was so good, and Terry Butcher and Martin, and the fullbacks could bomb on and help out. And Beardsley dropped in as well, so he'd help them out. And he played quite deep in that game. But so we all of a sudden, for the first time in I could remember, there was like a freedom to our game. It wasn't stuck in this 4-4-2. We were always stuck in that format, and it was just so easy to play against. But we were always outnumbered in midfield. Every time we played a good continental side or a good South American side, we were always outnumbered. We'd never get a kick. We'd still compete because we were aggressive. We could defend. We could score goals, but we never played. But in Italian 90 was the first time I felt that we really actually we played. I watched the Germany semi-final back. We were as good as them, possibly a bit better. I think we almost outplayed one of the great Dutch teams. They'd just won the Euros 2 years before with Koeman. I thought we were the better side in that game. We actually played some really nice football. It wasn't just about hanging on and then being aggressive and all that stuff. So it was a big change, 1990.
Football had gone through a bad time, hadn't it, with Heysel, Hillsborough, etc. Hooliganism. I think it's true to say that the public fell back in love with football through Italian 90 and the exploits of the England side. It's very important.
Unquestionably. And we've seen similar in the last 3 years, haven't we, with the Gareth Southgate teams, bringing back, making footballers liked again, I suppose you could perhaps say. But 90, I think, was pivotal in the way, the transformation of the game in this country, because not just we'd had the Heysel and Hillsborough and the stadiums were revamped, but I think part of it was that Italian 90 was so huge and impacted so many different kinds of people, and it suddenly attracted women would enjoy football possibly for the first time, or a lot more women, I should say. Youngsters were getting massive into the game. The middle classes were perhaps getting more into it than it was always very much a working man's sport, and I think that changed. And then obviously on the back of that, you had ground changes, much better. The Premier League kicks off, and all of a sudden there was this boom period, and it's not really stopped since.
Sadly, kind of, Gary, in the middle of that, obviously, your England career came to a close, not in the manner I'm pretty sure that you would have wanted it to happen. Would you mind reflecting a little bit on that Euros and what you think happened and why?
I think that I know what happened. I mean, I got brought off, and it was my last game. It turned out to be my last game for England. I was hoping it wouldn't be at the time, but we were playing Sweden, obviously, and I was one behind Bobby Charlton's goal scoring record. But that England team, it was certainly the weakest of my time, and probably one of the weakest ever. I think we'd lost a number of players after 90 through retirement, obviously Shilton, Terry Butcher. And then Graham Taylor came in, and I think this was Graham Taylor's biggest mistake, that he eased out Brian Robson, eased out Chris Waddle, eased out Peter Beardsley. And those were world-class players. And you don't have that many world-class players at any one given moment. And then before the tournament, we lost Gaza and we lost John Barnes, who did his Achilles just before the tournament. So all of a sudden, all your creativity was gone. So we weren't a very creative team, and there weren't many chances. But so we played Sweden. The last game, I think I made the goal. We go 1-up, then they equalised. And then all of a sudden, we've got to win the game to get through. And then, I don't know, with 20 odd minutes to go, 30 minutes to go, Graham Taylor brought me off. Now, it's perfectly understandable. He has to make decisions. And if it had worked and Alan Smith came on and scored 1 or 2, then it'd have been a heroic decision. Obviously, I hardly ever taken off. So it's not like a game nowadays where everyone gets taken off. There's 1 or 2 substitutes back then. I was obviously despondent that I was taken off, but I was just sitting on the bench hoping we'd get through. So it turned out to be my last game. And the truth is, people say, do you know what? In hindsight, Graham Taylor made me a mark. I know it sounds daft, but everyone, the team, we were pretty hopeless in that tournament. We went home and every player was getting dog's abuse, except for me. I was like, because he'd taken off, everyone felt sorry for me. And if I'd have stayed on and not scored, I'd have got pelters with everyone else. But because of, it's not how I felt at the time, because I always believed that I would still score a goal, because that was the nature of the beast. Goal scorer, exactly. You always have to believe. But looking back after years on, am I angry at Graham Southgate? No, not in the slightest. No, he made his decision. I felt for him a bit, because I think with Graham, he was a little bit out of his depth with England. I think also he got stuck between a rock and a hard place. I think if he'd have come in and played the Graham Taylor way that he'd done at Watford, because Graham Taylor's style of football was long ball, massive striker, flick-ons, long throws, balls into the corner, all that sort of stuff. But I don't think he had the conviction to play that way with England. And I think if he had it done, at least he'd have fallen on his own sword. But in the end, I think he went with a bit of both. Would try and play some football and would also try and and it just didn't work for him. It'd have been better off sticking Alan Smith up front with me, running off him and just launching it. At least that would have been his way. But I like Graham. I saw him many times after, and obviously he's no longer with us, sadly. But we were always fine, and we always got on okay. But it was just events, really. It just happened. But he did definitely make me a martyr, saved me away.
And of course, now we have, as you said, we've got Gareth Southgate, and he talked about people falling in love with the game and with the England team. Yeah. That certainly happened. It's only a couple of months ago now, Gary. We've got some very fine young players. There were some odd decisions made in terms of, we talked about substitutions, when players were brought on and players being brought on and then taken off. Grealish is clearly going to be a superstar. What do you make of the fact that Gareth seems to be slightly inhibited when it comes to playing him, and not quite convinced as perhaps he should be?
He's in charge, and the thing is, everyone's an England manager when England are playing, aren't they? We've all do things slightly differently, but so far he's done a fabulous job, not just on the pitch, but I think off the pitch as well. The transformation in the whole image of England's young footballers has been marvellous under Gareth. And that's really important in terms of what it does to people watching the game, youngsters learning, etc. And we've got a fine crop of young talent. I think Gareth, by his nature, he's a defender, he's cautious, and his football is cautious. It's quite Mourinho-esque, if you look at it that way. He plays, whether it's 4 or 5 at the back, he tends to play 2 holding players as well, and then maybe sometimes as little as 3 attack-minded players, particularly in the times when he played 5 at the back or 3, whichever way you want to call it. But so I think by his nature, he's quite cautious, but we have got some fabulously brilliant young attacking footballers in this country. We're going to be really good. We're going to be, like this. We're going to be challenging for tournaments for the next 10, 15 years with what we've got. I think we're going to have a really competitive spec. Doesn't mean we'll win things. I suspect we will. I think we'll break our duck at some point. They're so young still. We played all those, and some of the, as you said, like Grealish Grealish is a bit older than some of them, but Foden and Saka and
Bellingham.
Mount and Bellingham's fantastic player, and there are so many of them that we're going to be super competitive. Now Gareth can't fit them all in, but he might have to find a way of us being slightly more attacking minded and dominate teams rather than get a goal and sit. So I think he's got, because what you want really is to create a team that people remember. Not necessarily just because you scrape a win in some competition, but a team that fills you with joy. But I'm a striker, Gareth's a defender. We have different mindsets on the game, but he's the one in charge. He has to do it how he thinks fit. But I would like to see them give them their wings, and let's play with attacking. If you're going to play wing backs, let's play with really attacking wing backs with Trent and stuff like that. But it's sport for choice, and I don't try and pick 11 players out of the players that England have got at the moment. It is very difficult, but it is exciting. I mean, the players, so much talent. They're everywhere. You can reel off about 10 names, and then you go, oh, I forgot those 3 or 4 or 5. It's encouraging. First time in my lifetime that I can remember us having the depth that we've got.
To me, Gary, the only negative is the social media, if you like, that you say we're all England managers and comment is fine. But as you're excellent on Twitter, A lot of people go overboard, don't they? They go too far with vicious.
You can't control other people. The only people that can do something about that, really, the social media platforms. I think if they can find a way to stop people being abusive, it's very difficult. But I think the vast majority of people are hugely supportive. But the trouble is, it's the people that shout the loudest and shout probably the most abuse are the ones you notice. And there's not much they can do. Players can get off social media if they want, but I think most of them use it so well. And as we've seen with people like Rashford and Sterling and Henderson and Mings and people, they're bright young men, and I think they're helping. But that's more of a societal issue as much as a football issue. Yes, they're people that like football and follow football and call themselves fans of football, but they're probably also people that if you met, you go, I'm not bothered about what you think. And also, you never get it. You never get that in the street. I've had a bit of stick on from certain people on Twitter over the years, but never in the street. People are just really nice. And then you might somebody having a pop at you on Twitter that's never met you in his life, doesn't know what you really like. Why try not to let that worry? But some people are more sensitive than others, and if you're that sensitive, my advice would be stay on social media.
Because the worry is, I know some managers have this worry that the players pick up the phone, don't they? Just after the final whistle, have a look at it, and there could be.
Yeah, but you can't, tell people what to do. And players, it's how it is now. Social media is an important part of all aspects of life, and that's the younger generation. No such thing as social. I'm probably glad there wasn't in some ways, but it would have been quite useful to. It's a lovely way to connect with your fans, which you never have, because people always say, footballers, they're all behind those big walls in their big houses, but this gives people a feeling, and your fans a feeling of what you like, and you can interact a little bit. And so there are a lot of positives, but yeah, of course, the abuse side of things, the odd horrible racist tweet or whatever, or Instagram post, it's just unacceptable. But that's something I think that social media companies you'd post a picture of a bit of action in a Premier League game off your own television. That's taken down pretty darn quick because of rights issues. They can certainly find a racist tweet and get rid of it quick.
Good point.
It's interesting, Gary, you talk about, we probably know a little bit more about players now because of their social media profile. It takes me back to when I got my lovely job on the Mail back in 1990, and we went on our first trip abroad. We were at Luton Airport, I recall, and you actually came over and spoke to the media and had a cup of coffee with us. People like Steve Curry and Harry and Colin Gibson and I, and the rest of the players could have moved on and didn't want to have anything to do with us. You were always very comfortable in the media and with the media.
I was, but it was also for a reason, because I knew what I wanted to do. After football, I knew I wanted to go into the media myself. And I used to, I remember it when we in tournaments in 86 and 90, I used to go and sit with the radio guys when they used to do their intros with you chaps, as you mentioned some of you guys there. And yeah, I used to sit and see how you wrote your opening line or your intro or your, and all stuff, because I was interested in the media myself, and it was a path that I wanted to go down. So there's a bit of a method in my madness, and I also thought, if I could make friends with you, you might be kinder to me.
And we probably were, weren't we? Yeah, exactly. Now look at you. You say you wanted to go into the media, and now you are the media.
Not really, but I've been very fortunate. I always thought if I could learn to present, it would give me a bit of a niche in this business, because obviously there are no other presenters that played at the kind of level that I have in football, so it gives me a little bit of an edge in terms of knowledge, and also in terms of interviewing managers and stuff. They never look at me and go, "What do you know?" A bonus, which is a bit of a bonus that I have. So I always figured if I could learn to actually present, then I might get some longevity in this business, and thankfully that's how it's turned out.
You had to overcome a few obstacles, Gary, didn't you, when you first started? Introducing the flagship programme. It doesn't come better, does it? And people, what's he doing? Why is he? And now you're a national treasure.
I'm not sure about that. No, not to some, John. But no, I've been doing it for so long now. I'm comfortable with it. I still love it. Still really enthusiastic. I love the sport. I love football. I love footballers. I love watching, and I love talking about it. So it's the dream job, and I'm still going at the moment. But no, I sometimes look in the mirror and think, have you been so lucky? So I have been immensely fortunate. So to have been given a gift from somewhere to score goals and then find something else that I could do.
No doubt, Gary, you'd have seen an article in the Independent last week, which had a bit of a knock at Match of the Day. Is it about to become obsolete? The same old dreary people talking about the same old. When are they going to get exciting people on there? I'm sure that went down like a lead balloon with your breakfast one day last week.
I didn't see it, but our editor did. And he ended up corresponding with the guy, just explaining how things actually really work in the real world of television. And by the end of it, the fellow was going, "Oh, no, absolutely right. I didn't mean it. I actually really think it's great and this and that." I saw the email exchange. It's quite hilarious. Honestly, he just completely backtracked, whoever he was. But yeah, I don't know. It's still incredibly popular. We're getting like 3 odd million on a Saturday night, coming on at 10:30. We get another over 1 million watching the repeat on Sunday mornings when people get up and watch it with their kids and stuff. And then we're getting these mad figures on iPlayer now where people watch it on catch up. So I think 1.5 million the last couple of shows, which beats pretty much anything else. So it's mad, really, because sports highlights don't work anywhere. It's just like a thing of the past in many ways, but Match of the Day bucks the trend. So I think it works. We've got great pundits. I don't know how you change it. I don't know what you do differently. Some people would like it to be more anarchy and like more tactic based, but we haven't got the time. We've got, say, 8 games to show on a Saturday night. We can't spend 10 minutes evaluating a corner. Otherwise, we're going to lose 2 games. There's the furore if a team's just playing in the last, if it's their team on last, they go bonkers. Imagine if we had to drop a game because we've overran. Limited about the amount of time we have because it's by the nature of the programme and the contract with the Premier League. So we can't make it a 3-hour show, and I don't think it'll work anyway. So in the end, we're also dealing, our audience is also not Sky's audience, who do it brilliantly. Monday Night Football, that stuff, great, fantastic. It works. You couldn't do that on Match of the Day because it's not what our audience wants. Most of our audience just want a quick fix to the football, a little bit, oh, that's a great goal, a little bit of fun, a little bit of good analysis on something, tell them something that they don't know and can't see for themselves, and then move on. I don't know what you do differently. I think one of his points apparently was bringing comedians.
Oh, for God's sake.
A couple of journalists.
Would you want to do that? There's been lots of, I always think comedy shows around football, we see them in tournaments, don't they? They sometimes put something on after. Do they work? Not very often. Occasionally, maybe. Not Match of the Day. I don't. Some people want to see more football, less chat, understood. Some people want to see more chat, less football, understood. But somewhere in the middle, we have to come up with what we think is about. And I think over the years we've worked that out. But people love it. By and large, people love it. They'll always get somebody that doesn't, but that's life.
But it is remarkable in these days of so much competition. You say Sky, you've worked for BT, Amazon. Everyone wants a slice of the cake. But dear old Match of the Day that our grandfathers watched is still right up there. And as you say, absolutely necessary viewing for any football supporter.
It is. And also, of course, not everybody's got Sky and BT and Amazon and everything. There's still a decent percentage of the population that on Match of the Day for their Premier League fix. And see it every week. And I think the Premier League understand the importance of it and getting a terrestrial audience involved and people that wouldn't ordinarily see football on television. So I think they've been wise in keeping that there. So it works. It just works. It rattles along. We show highlights of all the games. We get a bit of shit on Twitter whoever's on last, but someone has to be.
I imagine those conversations are rather interesting about the running order, Gary.
Yeah, the editor and myself, we just sit down and talk about it. And ultimately, it's his decision. Well, it's definitely his decision when people don't like it. But no, normally it pretty much picks itself. Really. And the thing I always judge it by is that when people complain about the running order, they always complain about where their team are.
Yeah.
And they'll say you've got a bias. And I'll say, no, the bias is yours. Because you just want your team higher up. I don't know why it's that important, personally. What does it matter? We show pretty much the same length of time for nearly all the games, unless it's an exceptional match. You're going to be on. You have to wait up a bit later, or you can record it, watch it whenever you want. So
it's like a stigma, though, isn't it, to be on last?
I know. It's like Brentford at the start of this season. I noted it myself, and then I've got a couple of tweets. Oh, that's 3 weeks we've been last every week. I said, well, why is that going to be the case all season? I go, no, it's not. No, your time will come. But the first weekend you played on Friday, and we unless it's unbelievable, we always put the Friday game on last. The next week it was 0-0, and there were goals in every. Picks itself last, has to be. And then this week, a load of good games: 2-1, 2-0, 3, 5-0 City, and then there was, I think, 2-2 draws, and then there was their game was 1-1. Now has to go. You can't. So it was just one of those things. We want Brentford on higher. They're playing some good football, and I'm sure that'll happen. But it does make me laugh. It's how it's so important, and they think it's a bias against a football club by a television program. It's mad, really. You hate Manchester United on there, but no, we don't. We don't hate. I don't hate anyone. Match of the Day as a program doesn't hate anyone. But it's the same. It's the same in everything. It's like in politics. People say, "Oh, the BBC." If you're on the right, people will say the BBC is way too far to the left, and if people are on the left, they say the BBC is way too far to the right. So people look for their own bias. They look for their own things that they want to. They'll notice something if it goes against what they believe in, and it's a similar thing with the running order. Although it's obviously,
you can see by enthusiasm, Gary, you're not going to leave just yet from the big one.
No, I've signed a new contract last year, final contract, so you're stuck with me for at least 4 years. Apologies.
Brilliant. Harry Kane, really, his contract.
Yeah, I didn't get any gentleman's agreement. So.
Having missed out on presenting Mastermind, you're now moving into the game show host, Gary. Cool, that must be going to go a bit generation game-ish.
No, it's not generation. It's more millionaire, that kind of show, money-winning quiz. It's brilliant as well. Honestly, I'm so thrilled with it. I did it all last week in Manchester. It's just such a good idea. It works. I won't give too much away. But it's such a feel-good show. We've given away loads of money, made a difference to people's lives. And it was something very different for me. And gave it a lot of thought. But I loved the idea. I loved the concept. And I thought, I'll give it a go. And I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. It was lovely. It was really moments where people are crying and they're cheering. And it was gorgeous. It really was. And I don't know, I'll be shocked if people don't enjoy it. People love quiz shows anyway and game shows, but with most game shows, it always generally ends in a downer. Sometimes you have a big win at the end of the show, that's great, but even probably the best show ever, best of its time, Millionaires, at the end they either agree for the amount because they don't know the answer, or they get it wrong and it's a downer. But this show I was in, nearly always ends on a marvellous moment. There's so much jeopardy. It's brilliant. Just works. Yeah, I built it up too much.
Are you more nervous taking a penalty against Cameroon or presenting a game show?
I don't really get nervous. The penalty things, it's quite tense. No, a game show is different, and presenting football is different. People used to say, what's worse? I said, if I'm presenting and I mess up a line or stumble over my words, which we all do sometimes, nobody's really bothered. But if you miss a penalty in the World Cup with 2-1 down against Cameroon with 8 minutes to go, then obviously that makes a difference to other people's lives, not just your own. But it doesn't matter as long as you score. But I used to quite enjoy those moments in a really masochistic way, because I always felt it was a chance to show off. I've got the nerve to take it, which sounds a bit daft, but yeah, it's kind of, you're in a position suddenly that most people will never, ever in their life be in or understand what it's like. And it's quite cool.
Brilliant.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, good.
Gary, just superb. So many lovely stories, and good luck with the show coming out. Yeah. We'll definitely be watching it. Yeah. And
Gary, really appreciate your time. Really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Great to talk to you. I enjoyed it.
Good lad, Gary. Thanks a lot, mate.
Cheers, Gary.
And that's it for this week. This podcast was produced and edited by Sam Sethi.
Come back to the Old Spice Boys next time. Follow us in your podcast app, and we're online at www.oldspiceboys.football. If you have any comments or questions, please tweet us at the Old Spice Boys. We'd love to hear from you.
Our next guest could hardly be more fascinating. As players are marketed and transferred for ever more astonishing sums, we're joined by Jonathan Barnett, Executive Chairman of ICM Stellar Sports, one of the biggest sports agencies in the world, and behind some of the most remarkable deals in football history, not least Jack Grealish's £100 million move from Aston Villa to Manchester City.
Hopefully, we'll see you next week.